Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Fintech News, November 19th, 2019. I'm your host, Nicholas Belvo, and as always, I'm joined by the head of research here at Fintech Cadence. Cigar, how's it going?
Good, you?
Wonderful. Today we have a lot of news, mostly coming out of Europe and mostly dealing with crypto and Bitcoin. First of all, in England, a new law has passed, making crypto assets now considered properly by law, and smart contracts are now binding. We're then going to talk about Deutsche Bourse and Swisscom, which are using tokenized assets and DLT, distributed ledger technology, to settle security transactions. We'll then move to Timit, a UK company that raises £4 million, a credit card startup out of the UK. And then lastly, Kin, Canadian-based coin, which now has over 1 million active spenders. So all that and a bit more in under 5 minutes. Here we go. Let's start with the first one out of the UK. So this new law, which now makes crypto assets property and smart contracts binding. I know you wanted to just relate this also to what's happening over in Germany.
Right. Yeah, both the stories connect well, but there are subtle differences, and it points towards one direction. So you want to talk about the part about about what Germany is doing? And
yeah, well, I think it's super relevant. I think it just shows a move of governments and large institutions now really believing in this new digital era.
Right. So for Germany, it's more about using the technology of DLT to digitize assets that aren't actually being digitized right now. For instance, let's assume that we own a small business and we want to sell shares on it without going through all the complications and dealing with the different issues involved with the current system.
Right.
So now there's a possibility, well, not now, but soon there'll be a possibility for us to digitize or chop up our company into smaller shares and then sell it. So it's really good news for startups that want to get benefit of their increase in valuation sooner rather than later. But on the other side, we have the English lawmakers making it binding by law that crypto assets will be treated as tradable assets. So these are cryptocurrencies, not just blockchain-based assets, but cryptocurrencies in general. And smart contracts over the blockchain will be binding by law.
Yeah, it's going to be like your old-fashioned contract is now the same thing as the new type.
Exactly. So both of these point towards the fact that cryptos, DLT, blockchain, everything is becoming more and more accepted by regulators, and that will eventually lead to more of it being used by the general public.
And my hunch, now that we're seeing this new trend, is that not in the near future, but further out, maybe in 10 years' time, these new regulations are actually going to supersede the old ones. So, for example, the new smart contracts are going to be the de facto, whereas the old type of paper contracts will no longer be recognized.
Right.
That's my bet. We'll see what happens. But where crypto assets and smart contracts will then, in the eyes of the regulators at least, and lawmakers, then really take the precedence and really be the de facto. And then we'll see the old ways, the traditional ways that are now still the majority way of recognizing assets and contracts go out the window.
Yeah. It makes life, your life and everyone else's life a lot easier if it's on blockchain. It's really fast. It's easy to trade or send to anyone. It's really much better than paper-based contracts.
Moving on to Timit. Timit's a startup out of the UK which just raised £4 million. You want to quickly tell us about what they do?
It's another credit card-based startup. News, but it's the good part about it is it's transparent, and comparing to the news that
so it's like a see-through credit card.
Not really. It's transparent in terms of the interest rate that it charges and the fees that it charges, and it gives you a really good insight into how much you need to pay off, or if you pay off this much, and this is the kind of interest.
So similar like what Apple Card is proposing, that they don't want to charge you interest, that they want to really tell you how to optimize your spending to be able to pay it off and not worry about interest fees.
Exactly.
But what we're seeing now with credit cards, essentially all these new age mobile-based credit cards, is that it's really all a UI play. They're really focusing on the design, that Apple mentality and philosophy.
Exactly.
That design is extremely important, and like we've said, often in fintech, it's a big marketing play as well. So design and marketing often go hand in hand to get that customer acquisition. So that's why we're seeing a lot of these now new credit cards popping up and getting these big financing rounds just to be able to grow really quickly, because at the end of the day, one of the main factors, relatively easy design.
Yeah, and there's this back-end part as well, and I believe that will become a data play. So the more data that you combine with your financial transaction data, the better insights that you can give to the consumer. So for instance, if you combine your financial transaction data with how much, where you drink coffee, it could give you better insights. So it will be a play of UX UI marketing plus also capturing data from other sources.
And that's where we come in with open banking and then applications such as Flips, for example, really making this data available to be able to merge with other data sets and give you really interesting insights.
This is where Google and all these tech giants will have...
Google announcing that they're moving into the health space, not necessarily fintech, but we'll certainly see some news coming out of that, where insurance is going to become, they're going to have insurance policies.
Right, yeah. Insurance, banking, it's going to be the big data play as well.
And I don't know, I think this was actually after last week's fintech news that Google, we saw news that they're moving into opening up their own checking accounts. I don't think we mentioned that on fintech news yet, but we definitely shared that on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Right.
But yeah, that's for 2020, we had an event called TechFins and Other Sleeping Giants. We saw it coming. It's happening.
It's happening.
And
it was only a matter of time.
For sure.
And then they have a big advantage again because of the data and the fact that they're a tech company, and UX UI it forms the basis for everything that they do.
Now, moving on to our last piece, Kin. So Kin is a company in itself that started out of Kik, which is a Canadian company that started by students at the University of Waterloo back in 2009, which was a messaging app that its whole idea was around anonymity. So you could use the app without anybody really knowing who you were, and that was their big angle to it. And then recently, over the last years, launched Kin.
Kin is a cryptocurrency that so you can earn crypto on the Kin app, and then you can use it on the app to make transactions. So what they say is that you can earn Kin if you watch content and ads that are related to the content on the Kik platform.
Almost dystopian, where we're seeing dystopian or utopian, where you're then paid to watch ads. But that's what they're proposing, and they just surpassed over 1 million people using this new token that you could spend in the app to buy silly things like stickers or new types of gifts, emojis, or you could actually use it as a real-world currency and buy things outside, like a cup of coffee or a T-shirt. Yeah,
it's a really interesting concept, and it was kind of under the radar. We'll be hearing about it now more often, but it's not a crypto that is really discussed in the crypto community. Not even in Canada, I've heard not many talks or instances about it. So it's coming onto the radar now. They have 220 million raised already, which is quite an impressive amount. So there is something definitely here.
And the mother company Kik had even had funding from Tencent, bringing it over to $1 billion valuation. So really interesting organization out of Canada that we didn't really detect before, but we're definitely going to keep looking into what they're up to. So that wraps up everything. We just want to end with a little shout out to our friends over at Luge Capital that won an award last night at the AI and Fintech Awards by Digital Finance Institute. So congrats everybody over at Luge. Co-op Marathon finals are tomorrow night. So the grand finale, a gala happening here in Montreal at l'Olympia is taking place. There's still tickets available. It's free to attend, and that way you'll be able to see all the winning projects in FinTech and the other tracks. So we hope you can join us there. And then lastly, next week on Wednesday, we're having the last FinTech Drinks of the year, 2000 to 2020, where we're going to be looking back at everything that's happened in the last 20 years in FinTech. And so essentially for the price of one ticket, you're getting to see 2 decades for the price of one. So it's a pretty good deal, and we're going to be seeing how the last 20 years can teach us about the next 20 years. So that's it from us. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you check out FinTech News again next week at 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.